Hello. Happy Friday. We made it. We made it to Friday. I sing a little song about how we made it to Friday. It's not a very good song, but I have a puppy. Uh, I have a puppy. There he is. There's that pup. Just sitting here looking at me. Gullo? What's Gullo, precious? Hey, puppy. Gullo to you too, says Farmhouse. Haha, let's all make fun of the typo. How are the Sharkies on this fine Friday evening? It's actually not pouring rain out right now, but we do have a rainfall warning for tomorrow night. Forecast is saying between 75 to 150 millimeters Saturday night to Monday sometime. Sleepily reaching across the table to the Bluetooth keyboard. And thus, Gollum. And Farmhouse is thoroughly explaining what happened and why it was funny. How has your week been? Are you still recovering sinus related things? We played Dungeons and Dragons yesterday. Curse of Strahd. Tiny bits, but mostly better. Alright. Yeah, our second full session, which we played for like 7 hours. The characters, our party, are intrepid adventurers, somewhat unwilling adventurers. Yeah, our sessions tend to go a bit long, I have noticed. In general, that's kind of frequently how they go. The entirety of it still that's questionable. The entirety of it was still spent inside Durst Manor. Since you didn't start playing until after you became parents. Oh, I see. Yeah, that's fair. That is very understandable. You would need to get like full-time babysitters in order to be able to do that. And then invite them to the D&D game. um Yeah, there was some spookiness in the last session. Farmhouse's character, the warlock, repeatedly blew up a small yellow doll. Well, a doll in a yellow dress, I suppose. It kept showing up, and so Farmhouse kept blasting it with Eldritch Blast. You think 6 hours once or twice? Well, that's pretty good. It was evil, probably. It kept appearing in places. What's D&D without blowing things up? Hmm. That seems like a question for the philosophers. Yeah. I don't know. Farmhouse, any highlights that you can think of? Our cleric was possessed by the ghost of a small boy, gained a flaw of being frightened of his own shadow, metaphorically speaking. Ramos's character now has 2 or 3 kills. You had a rogue once who couldn't get his hands on gunpowder, so resorted to making Molotov cocktails. That is fair, especially at low levels. I definitely had a character, some kind of spellcaster. That might have been the Beguiler I played, that had very few spell slots at like low levels, and so basically used oil and fire and tried to, I think, set fire to some kobolds or something, or smoke them out of their cave. Yeah, at the end of the session, just about pretty much right at the end of the session, they got to level 2. Which is exciting because level 1 is dangerous. One of the characters, well, 2 of the characters very nearly died. I would say 2 of the characters were both a Constitution save away from death at one point or another. Yeah, flasks of oil are not terribly expensive and can be used for destruction. Yeah, they can't use too much fire where they're at because they're inside basically a manor. They're all bricked up inside this mansion. And so if they were to set fire to the place, they don't really have a way to get out themselves. So yeah. There were some encounters with ghosts of various types. Both friendly and not friendly. Well, sort of. Definitely one that was not friendly. That was dangerous. There was a bedroom that they were very afraid to go into. What, Ben? You want snacks? I'm doing my stream, so that means you get snacks? I suppose that's a good association to have. Yeah. Oh, you dropped it. Oh, you got it. He's sitting here giving me a look like, come on, you're doing this, that means you feed me. Well, that's why I've been giving him treats when I do this, so that he sticks around. Pretty sure you've played where a boat you were on was set fire. Oh boy. We were in a game once where a boat we were on a boat, and someone had this javelin that basically had an ice equivalent of fireball cast on it, and then they threw the javelin at another boat that was kind of attached to ours. The whole thing was kind of touch and go. Essentially froze a whole boat. But, it was the ice equivalent of fireball, so it could have been worse. It was not the fire equivalent. And I think we were pretty like level 2 or 3 at the time. This was in a 3.5 edition game. Yeah, that's right. Magical Titanic. That was a strange game. It had some good moments and it had some bad moments, and it kind of ended on a sour note, unfortunately. But, it started off kind of strong. Farmos and I have been playing a lot of the new Animal Crossing update, which is kind of entertaining. I am reminded of that because on this side of me here, I see Benebig's toy on the stair, and it kind of looks like they've introduced gyroids into the game. You can go to mystery islands and dig up these fragments of gyroids, and then you plant them on your own island and water them, and the next day you dig them up and they turn into these little noise making things randomly that look sort of strange, and they'll kind of make noise or sing or bloop or twang or whatever to the whatever music you've got playing in the room they're in or whatever. So I've got a bunch of those set up, and they're all kind of in my villager's house, and they're all dancing and twanging and making weird noises to the music. What else happened in the most recent D&D session? I think it was just a lot of slow exploration. They found a body or three that seemed to have met unpleasant ends. Body or four, actually. And then they found a secret passage that led all the way down to the underground basement. And that's where we stopped. They wanted to keep going, and I was like, okay, well, it's pretty late, and I think this is a good place to stop here. And everyone was kind of like, oh, uh-oh, maybe there's more to come than we think there is. Yeah, there's definitely kind of a mix of steal everything that isn't nailed down that we are capable of carrying, but also we need to get out of here as quickly as possible so we don't all die. So, we are on page 293 out of 412 of Guards by Sir Terry Pratchett. So we're getting there. Less than 200 pages to go. Puppy's coming and going a lot. What? The last session of, or the last episode, whatever, last stream where we read, was pretty creepy. The whole dinner with, or not dinner, working lunch with the king, who also at this point happens to be a dragon. I don't know what it is about saying the word dragon out loud, but I'm always like a little worried that I'm gonna like mess up the R and say like dwagon or dlagon. I don't know. Oh, puppy's grabbing his hedgehog. Yeah, Farmer was talking about how the other characters are kind of a little more spooked, but some of them have almost died, so that's fair. I feel the need to pause, although Pup's just kind of showing his butt to the camera now as he's chewing on his toy. Yeah, working lunch with the dragon was pretty terrifying for everyone involved in it. Poor Lupin Wants. Not the most sympathetic character previously, but now it's like, oh, he's not having a good time. The dragon was given the crown on the coronation dais by the Grand Priest of Blind Io. Puppy just pushed his toy down the stairs. You lost your toy bin. It rolled away. It escaped. Yeah, given the crown, and I guess that makes the Dragon King. So there was some discussion of a variety of topics with said king on foreign policy and feeding habits and treasure. Oh, Pup looks so sad now. How could this happen to me? I made a mistake. And that's roughly it. It was not a lot of content covered. It was just a slow, frightening process of what was covered, somewhat like the D&D game. Yeah. So I don't know. Let's get to it, huh? Let's read some book. This is where we're at. Not that much left to go. We've read more than half. Probably 3/4 of the way through now. Gonna have to start talking about what to read next. Yeah, Puppy's got lots of toys. Once sat alone in the dark, ruined hall, waiting. What? What? I don't know. Once sat alone in the dark, ruined hall, waiting. He could try running, but it'd find him again. It'd always be able to find him. It could smell his mind. Or it would flame him. That was worse. Just like the brethren. Oh. Perhaps it was an instantaneous death. It looked like an instantaneous death. But once lay awake at night, wondering whether those last microseconds somehow stretched to a subjective, white-hot eternity. Every tiny part of your body, a mere smear of plasma, and you, there, alive in the middle of it all. Not you. I would not flame you. It wasn't telepathy. As far as Wantz had always understood it, telepathy was like hearing a voice in your head. This was like hearing a voice in your body. His whole nervous system twanged to it like a bow. Rise. Wantz jerked to his feet, overturning the chair and banging his legs on the table. When that voice spoke, he had as much control over his body as water had over gravity. Come. Wantz lurched across the floor. The wings unfolded slowly, with the occasional creak, until they filled the hall from side to side. The tip of one smashed a window and stuck out into the afternoon air. The dragon, slowly, sensuously, stretched out its neck and yawned. When it had finished, it brought its head around until it was a few inches in front of Wantz's face. What does voluntary mean? It means doing something of your own free will, said Wantz. But they have no free will. They will increase my horde, or I will flame them. Wantz gulped. Yes, he said, but you mustn't. The silent roar of fury spun him around. There is nothing I mustn't. No, 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 squeaked Wantz, clutching his head. I didn't mean that, believe me. This way is better, that's all. Better and safer. None can defeat me. This is certainly the case. None can control me. Wantz flung up his finger-spread hands in a conciliatory fashion. Of course, he said. But there are ways and ways, you know. Ways and ways. All the roaring and flaming, you see. You don't need it.
Foolish ape! How else can I make them do my bidding?
Once put his hands behind his back. They'll do it of their own free will, he said. And in time, they'll come to believe it was their own idea. It'll be a tradition. Take it from me, we humans are adaptable creatures. The dragon gave him a long, blank stare. In fact, said Once, trying to keep the trembling out of his voice, before too long, if someone comes along and tells them that a dragon king is a bad idea, they'll kill him themselves. The dragon blinked. For the first time Once could remember, it seemed uncertain. I know people, you see, said Once simply. The dragon continued to pin him with its gaze.
If you are lying,
it thought eventually, you know I can't. Not to you.
And they really act like this?
Oh, yes. All the time. It's a basic human trait. Once knew that the dragon could read at least the upper levels of his mind. They resonated in terrible harmony. And he could see the mighty thoughts behind the eyes in front of him. The dragon was horrified. I'm sorry, said Once weakly. That's just how we are. It's all to do with survival, I think.
There will be no mighty warriors sent to kill me?
It thought, almost plaintively. I don't think so.
No heroes?
Not anymore. They cost too much.
But I will be eating people!
Once whimpered. He felt the sensation of the dragon rummaging around in his mind, trying to find a clue to understanding. He saw, half sensed, the flicker of random images, of dragons, of the mythical age of reptiles, and here he felt the dragon's genuine astonishment, of some of the less commendable areas of human history. Which were most of it. And, after the astonishment, came the baffled anger. There was practically nothing the dragon could do to people that they had not, sooner or later, tried on one another, often with enthusiasm.
You have the effrontery to be squeamish,
it thought at him.
But we were dragons. We were supposed to be cruel, cunning, heartless, and terrible. But this much I can tell you, you ape.
The great face pressed even closer, so that Once was staring into the pitiless depths of his eyes.
We never burned and tortured and ripped one another apart and called it morality.
The dragon stretched its wings again, once or twice, and then dropped heavily onto the tawdry assortment of mildly precious things. Its claws scrabbled at the pile. It sneered.
A three-legged lizard wouldn't hoard this lot,
it thought. There will be better things, whispered Once, temporarily relieved at the change in direction. Sharkies say dragons have a moral code.
There had better be.
Can I? Once hesitated. Can I ask you a question?
Ask.
You don't need to eat people, surely? I think that's the only problem from people's point of view, you see, he added, his voice speeding up to a gabble. "The treasure and everything, that doesn't have to be a problem. But if it's just a matter of, well, protein, then perhaps it has occurred to a powerful intellect such as your own that something less controversial, like a cow, might—" The dragon breathed a horizontal streak of fire that calcined the opposite wall. Farmo says not semi-precious, just mildly precious.
"Need? Need?" it roared, when the sound had died away. "You talk to me of need? Isn't it the tradition that the finest flower of womanhood should be sent to the dragon to ensure peace and prosperity?"
But, you see, we have always been moderately peaceful and reasonably prosperous.
"Do you want this state of affairs to continue?"
The force of the thought drove Wantz to his knees. "Of course," he managed. Sharky say, "I do need to eat people, and don't call me Shirley." I love that movie. The dragon stretched its claws luxuriantly.
"Then the need is not mine. It is yours," it thought. "Now get out of my sight."
Wantz sagged as it left his mind. The dragon slithered over the cut-price hoard, leapt up on the ledge of one of the hall's big windows, and smashed the stained glass with its head. The multicolored image of a city father cascaded into the other debris below. The long neck stretched out into the early evening air and turned like a seeking needle. Lights were coming on across the city. The sound of 1,000,000 people being alive made a muted, deep thrumming. The dragon breathed deeply, joyfully. Then it hauled the rest of its body onto the ledge, shouldered the remains of the window's frame aside, and leapt into the sky.
"What is it?"
said Nobby. It was a vaguely round, of woodish texture, and it was vaguely round, of a woodish texture, and when struck, made a noise like a ruler plucked over the edge of a desk. Sergeant Colin tapped it again.
"I give in,"
he said. Carrot proudly lifted it out of the battered packaging.
"It's a cake,"
he said, shoving both hands under the thing and raising it with some difficulty.
"From my mother."
He managed to put it on the table without trapping his fingers.
"Can you eat it?"
said Nobby.
"It's taken months to get here. You'd think it would go stale." "Oh, it's to a special dwarfish recipe," said Carrot. "Dwarfish cakes don't go stale." Sergeant Colin gave it another sharp rap. "I suppose not," he conceded.
"It's incredibly sustaining," said Carrot. "Practically magical. The secret has been handed down from dwarf to dwarf for centuries. One tiny piece of this, and you won't want anything to eat all day."
"Get away?"
said Colin. "A dwarf can go hundreds of miles with a cake like this in his pack," Carrot went on. Framos is remembering Cram.
"I bet he can," said Colin gloomily. "I bet all the time he'd be thinking, 'Bloody hell, I hope I can find something else to eat soon. Otherwise, it's a bloody cake again.
Cram, cram, cram. Carrot, to whom the word irony meant something to do with metal, picked up his pike, and after a couple of impressive rebounds, managed to cut the cake into approximately 4 slices. Cutting cake with a pike. And bouncing off. "There we are," he said cheerfully. "One for each of us, and one for the captain." He realized what he had said. "Oh, sorry." "Yes," said Colin flatly. They sat in silence for a moment. "I liked him," said Carrot. "I'm sorry he's gone." There was some more silence, very similar to the earlier silence, but even deeper and more furrowed with depression. "I expect you'll be made captain now," said Carrot. Colin started.
Me? I don't want to be captain. I can't do the thinking. It's not worth all that thinking just for another $9 a month.
He drummed his fingers on the table.
Is that all he got? Said Nobby. Thought officers were rolling in it. $9 a month, said Colin. I saw the pay scales once. $9 a month and $2 plumes allowance. Only he never claimed that bit. Funny, really. He wasn't the plumes type, said Nobby. You're right, said Colin. The thing about the captain, see, I read this book once. You know, we've all got alcohol in our bodies. Sort of natural alcohol. Even if you never touch a drop in your life, your body sort of makes it anyway. But Captain Vimes, see, he's one of those people whose body doesn't do it naturally. Like, he was born 2 drinks below normal. Gosh, said Carrot. Yes, so, when he's sober, he's really sober. Nerd, they call it. Knurd. Maybe I should pronounce the K. Knurd. You know how you feel when you wake up if you've been on the piss all night, Nobby? Well, he feels like that all the time. Poor bugger, said Nobby. I never realized. No wonder he's always so gloomy. So, he's always trying to catch up, see? It's just that he doesn't always get the dose right. And, of course, Colin glanced at Carrot, he was brung low by a woman. Mind you, just about anything brings him low. So what do we do now, Sergeant? Said Nobby. And do you think he'd mind if we eat his cake? Said Carrot wistfully. It'd be a shame to let it go stale. I thought he just said... Colin shrugged. The older men sat in miserable silence as Carrot macerated his way through the cake like a bucket wheel rock crusher in a chalk pit. That's not something that you hear people compared to frequently. Even if it had been the lightest of soufflés, they wouldn't have had any appetite. Sharkies say, my mom made a cake that hard once. My friend couldn't stomp a slice with her
90s big-heeled shoe. I like the unspoken part of that story that led to your friend trying to stomp on a cake. Like, however it got to that part of, you know, mom made cake, friend tried to stomp on it but couldn't. They were contemplating life without the captain. It was going to be bleak, even without dragons. Say what you liked about Captain Vimes, he'd had style. It was cynical, black-nailed style, but he'd had it, and they didn't. He could read long words and add up. Even that was style of a sort. He even got drunk in style. They'd been trying to drag the minutes out, trying to stretch out the time. But the night had come. There was no hope for them. They were going to have to go out on the streets. It was 6 of the clock, and all wasn't well. Sharky had a friend who stomped one of his mom's oatmeal cookies. Didn't crumble much. I feel like your friends don't understand what you're supposed to do with baked goods. Personally, I've never had a muffin and thought, I ought to step on this. Like, it's not my train of thought. Unless it's got raisins in it. I don't know, maybe then.
I miss Errol, too, said Carrot.
He was the captain's, really,
said Nobby.
Anyway, Lady Ramkin'll know how to look after him.
It's not as though we could...
I feel like I'm kind of bungling Colin's voice today for some reason. Gotta get more out of breath.
It's not as though...
No, what's going on?
It's not as though we could leave anything around either, said Colin. I mean, even the lamp oil. He even drank the lamp oil.
And mothballs,
said Nobby.
A whole box of mothballs. Why would anyone want to eat mothballs? And the kettle? And sugar? He was a devil for sugar.
He was nice, though, said Carrot. Friendly.
Oh, I'll grant you, said Colin. But it's not right, really. A pet where you have to jump behind a table every time it hiccups.
I shall miss his little face, said Carrot.
Nobby blew his nose loudly. It was echoed by a hammering on the door. Colin jerked his head. Carrot got up and opened it. A couple of members of the palace guard were waiting with arrogant impatience. They stepped back when they saw Carrot, who had to bend a bit to see under the lintel. Bad news, like Carrot, travels fast.
We brung you a proclamation, said one of them. You got to... What's all that fresh paint on your breastplate? Said Carrot politely.
Nobby and the sergeant peered around him. It's a dragon, said one of the younger guards.
The dragon,
corrected his superior.
Here, I know you, said Nobby. You're Scully Multoon. Used to live in Mincing Street. Your mom made cough sweets, didn't she? And fell in the mixture and died. I never have a cough sweet, but I think of your mum.
"Hello, Nobby," said the guard, without enthusiasm.
I bet your old mum'd be proud of you. You with a dragon on your vest,
said Nobby conversationally. The guard gave him a look made of hatred and embarrassment.
And new plumes on your hat, too,
Nobby added sweetly. "This here is a proclamation what you are commanded to read," said the guard loudly. "And post up on street corners also. By order."
Pose,
said Nobby. Sergeant Colin grabbed the scroll in one ham-like fist.
Whereas,
he read slowly, tracing the lettering with a hesitant finger.
"It hath plays said they dare rager the dragon, Curly, king of kings, and a bear
Sweat beaded on the broad, pink cliff of his forehead.
Absolute, that is, rare, rare, roller of.
He lapsed into the tortured silence of academia, his fingertip jerking slowly down the parchment.
"No,"
he said at last.
"That's not right, is it? It's not going to eat someone."
"Consume," said the older guard. "It's all part of the social contract," said his assistant woodenly. "A small price to pay, I'm sure you will agree, for the safety and protection of the city."
"From what?"
said Nobby.
"We've never had an enemy we couldn't bribe or corrupt." "Until now,"
said Colin darkly. "You catch on fast," said the guard. "So, you're going to broadcast it, on pain of pain." Carrot peered over Colin's shoulder. "What's a virgin?" he said.
"An unmarried girl,"
said Colin quickly. "What, like my friend Reet?" said Carrot, horrified. "Well, no," said Colin. "She's not married, you know. None of Mrs. Palm's girls are married." "Well, yes," said Colin. "Well then," said Carrot, with an air of finality, "we're not having any of that kind of thing, I hope."
"People won't stand for it," said Colin. "You mark my words."
The guards stepped back, out of range of Carrot's rising wrath. "They can please themselves," said the senior guard. "But if you don't proclaim it, you can try explaining things to His Majesty." They hurried off. Pharma saying, "Sound it out." "Oh yes, consume is much better than eat." Sharky say, "Poor naive Carrot." Pharma says, "Oh dear, I mean, he still got to the right point either way." Nobby darted out into the street.
"Dragon on your vest!" he shouted. "If your old mum knew about this, she'd turn in her vat! You going around with a dragon on your vest!"
She'd turn in her vat. Oh boy. Colin wandered back to the table and spread out the scroll. "Bad business," he mumbled. "It's already killed people, said Carrot. Contrary to 16 separate acts in council.
Well, yes. But that was just like, the hurly-burly of this and that, said Colin. Not that it wasn't bad. I mean, but people sort of participating. Just handing over some slip of a girl and standing round watching as if it's all proper and legal. That's much worse.
Sharkies say, makes you wonder what the cough sweets were made from. Framo says, mainly sugar, herbs, mainly.
I reckon it all depends on your point of view,
said Nobby thoughtfully.
What do you mean? Well, from the point of view of someone being burned alive, it probably doesn't matter much,
said Nobby philosophically.
People won't stand for it, I said
Colin, ignoring this.
You'll see. They'll march on the palace, and what will the dragon do then, eh?
Burn 'em all, said Nobby promptly. Colin looked puzzled.
It wouldn't do that, would it?
He said.
Don't see what's to prevent it, do you?
Said Nobby. He glanced out of the doorway.
He was a good lad, that boy. Used to run errands for my granddad. Who'd have thought he'd go around with a dragon on his chest?
What are we going to do, Sergeant? Said Carrot.
I don't want to be burned alive, said Sergeant Colin. My wife'd give me hell. So, I suppose we've got to do what's name? Proclaim it. But don't worry, lad, he said, patting Carrot on one muscular arm and repeating, as if he hadn't quite believed himself the first time, it won't come to that. People'll never stand for it.
Lady Ramkin ran her hands over Errol's body. Damned if I know what's going on in there, she said. The little dragon tried to lick her face. What's he been eating? The last thing, I think, was a kettle, said Vimes. A kettle of what? No, a kettle. A black thing with a handle and spout. He sniffed it for ages, then he ate it. Errol grinned weakly at him and belched. They both ducked. Oh, and then we found him eating soot out of the chimney, Vimes went on, as their heads rose again over the railings. They leaned back over the reinforced bunker that was one of Lady Ramkin's sick-bay pens. It had to be reinforced. Usually, one of the first things a sick dragon did was lose control of its digestive processes. He doesn't look sick exactly, she said. Just fat. He whines a lot, and you can sort of see things moving under his skin. You know what I think? You know how you said they can rearrange their digestive system? Oh, yes. All the stomachs and pancreatic crackers can be hooked up in various ways, you see, to take advantage of whatever they can find to make flame with, said Vimes. Yes. I think he's trying to make some sort of very hot flame. He wants to challenge the big dragon. Every time it takes to the air, he just sits there whining. And doesn't explode? Not that we've noticed. I mean, I'm sure if he did, we'd spot it. He just eats indiscriminately. Hard to be sure. He sniffs everything, and eats most things. 2 gallons of lamp oil, for example. Anyway, I can't leave him down there. We can't look after him properly. It's not as if we need to find out where the dragon is now, he added bitterly. I think you're being a bit silly about all this, she said, leading the way back to the house. Silly? I was sacked in front of all those people. Yes, but it was all a misunderstanding, I'm sure. I didn't misunderstand it. Well, I think you're just upset because you're impotent. Vimes's eyes bulged. Whee! He said. Against the dragon, Lady Ramkin went on, quite unconcerned. You can't do anything about it. I reckon this damn city and the dragon just about deserve one another, said Vimes. People are frightened. You can't expect much of people when they're so frightened. She touched him gingerly on his arm. It was like watching an industrial robot being expertly manipulated to grasp an egg gently. I feel like that description doesn't quite fit Discworld. Farmo says Bin didn't like him being fired. That's what that bark was about. Not everyone's as brave as you, she added, timidly. Me? The other week, when you stopped them killing my dragons. Oh, that. That's not bravery. Anyway, that was just people. People are easier. I'll tell you one thing for nothing. I'm not looking up that dragon's nose again. I wake up at days thinking about that. I wake up at days. Guess that's a consequence of being in the Night Watch. Oh, she seemed deflated. Well, if you're sure. I've got lots of friends, you know. If you need any help, you've only got to say. The Duke of Stow-Heelot is looking for a guard captain, I'm sure. I'll write you a letter. You'll like them. They're a very nice young couple. I'm not sure what I shall do next, said Vimes, more gruffly than he intended. I'm considering one or two offers. Well, of course. I'm sure you know best. Vimes nodded. Farmo says they're sweet together. They complement each other well as partners. Lady Ramkin twisted her handkerchief round and round in her hands. Well, then, she said. Well, said Vimes, I, expect you'll be wanting to be off, then. Yes, I expect I had better be going. There was a pause. Then they both spoke at once. It's been very... I'd just like to say... Sorry. No, you were speaking. No, sorry, you were saying? Oh, Vimes hesitated. I'll be off, then. Oh, yes. Lady Ramkin gave him a washed-out smile. Can't keep all those offers waiting, can you? She said. She thrust out a hand. Vimes shook it carefully. Farmo says she's pretty sure the Duke and Duchess of Stow-Heelot are characters we know from a previous book, so it was a nice throwback there. So, I'll just be going then, he said. Do call again, said Lady Ramkin, more coldly. "If you are ever in this area, and so on, I'm sure Errol would like to see you." Ouch. "Yes. Well, goodbye, then." "Goodbye, Captain Vimes." He stumbled out of the door and walked hurriedly down the dark, overgrown path. He could feel her gaze on the back of his neck as he did so, or at least he told himself that he could. She'd be standing in the doorway, nearly blocking out the light, just watching me. But I'm not going to look back, he thought. That would be a really silly thing to do. I mean, she's a lovely person. She's got a lot of common sense and an enormous personality. But really, I'm not going to look back, even if she stands there while I walk all the way down the street. Sometimes you have to be cruel to be kind. So, when he heard the door shut, when he was only halfway down the drive, he suddenly felt very, very angry, as if he had just been robbed. He stood still and clasped and unclasped his hands in the darkness. He wasn't Captain Vimes anymore. He was Citizen Vimes, which meant that he could do things he'd never once dreamt of doing. Perhaps he could go and smash some windows. The Sharkies say, huge tracts of land. Yeah. No, that wouldn't be any good. He wanted more than that. To get rid of that bloody dragon. To get his job back. To get his hands on whoever was behind all this. To forget himself just once and hit someone until he was exhausted. He stared at nothing. Down below, the city was a mass of smoke and steam. He wasn't thinking of that, though. He was thinking of a running man, and, further back in the fuddled mists of his life, a boy running to keep up. And under his breath he said, "Any of them get out?" Sergeant Colin finished the proclamation and looked around at the hostile crowd.
"Don't blame me," he said. "I just read the things. I don't write 'em."
"That's a human sacrifice, that is," said someone. "There's nothing wrong with human sacrifice," said a priest.
"Ah, per se," said the first speaker quickly. "For proper religious reasons, and using condemned criminals and so on."
Footnote 1. A number of religions in Ankh-Morpork still practiced human sacrifice, except that they didn't really need to practice anymore because they had got so good at it. City law said that only condemned criminals should be used, but that was all right because in most of the religions, refusing to volunteer for sacrifice was an offense punishable by death. End of footnote.
"But that's different from bunging someone to a dragon just because it's feeling peckish. That's a spirit," said Sergeant Colin.
"Taxes is one thing, but eating people is another."
"Well said."
"If we all say we won't put up with it, what can the dragon do?" Nobby opened his mouth. Colin clamped a hand over it and raised a triumphant fist in the air.
"It's just what I've always said,"
he said.
"The people united can never be ignited."
There was a ragged cheer.
"Hang on a minute," said a small man slowly.
As far as we know,
The dragon's only good at one thing. It flies around the city, setting fire to people. I'm not actually certain what is being proposed that would stop it doing this.
Yes, but if we all protest, said the first speaker, his voice modulated with uncertainty.
It can't burn everybody,
said Colin. He decided to play his new ace again, and added proudly,
The people united can never be ignited.
There was rather less of a cheer this time. People were reserving their energy for worrying.
I'm not exactly sure I understand why not. Why can't it burn everyone and fly off to another city?
Because,
the Horde, said Colin. It needs people to bring its treasure.
yeah,
Well, maybe, but how many exactly? What? How many people? Out of the whole city, I mean. Perhaps it won't need to burn the whole city down, just some bits. Do we know what bits?
look, this is getting silly, said the first speaker.
If we go around looking at the problems the whole time, we'll never do anything. It just pays to think things through first, that's all I'm saying. Such as, what happens even if we beat the dragon? Oh, come on, said Sergeant Colin. No, seriously, what's the alternative? A human being for a start? Please yourself, said the little man primly. But I reckon one person a month is pretty good compared to some rulers we've had. Anyone remember Nersh the lunatic? Or giggling Lord Smintz and his laugh-a-minute dungeon?
There was a certain amount of mumbling of the he's got a point variety.
But they got overthrown, said Colin. No, they didn't. They were assassinated. Same thing, said Colin. I mean, no one's going to assassinate the dragon. It'd take more than a dark night and a sharp knife to see it off, I know that.
I can see what the captain means, he thought. No wonder he always has a drink after he thinks about things. We always beat ourselves before we even start. Give any Ankh-Morpork man a big stick, and he'll end up clubbing himself to death. Reminds me of that meme of the guy riding the bike and then he sticks the stick in his own spokes. Parmo says, people love things that rhyme. Makes them sound more true. Look here, you mealy-mouthed little twerp, said the first speaker, picking up the little one by his collar and curling his free hand into a fist. I happen to have 3 daughters, and I happen to not want any of them thank you very much. Yes, and the people united will never be... Colin's voice faltered. He realized that the rest of the crowd were all staring upward. The bugger, he thought, as rationality began to drain away. It must have flannel feet. The dragon shifted its position on the ridge of the nearest house, flapped its wings once or twice, yawned, and then stretched its neck down into the street. The man, blessed with daughters, stood, with his fist upraised, in the center of a rapidly expanding circle of bare cobbles. The little man wriggled out of his frozen grasp and darted into the shadows. It suddenly seemed that no man in the entire world was so lonely and without friends. I see, he said quietly. He scowled up at the inquisitive reptile. In fact, it didn't seem particularly belligerent. It was looking at him with something approaching interest.
I don't care,
he shouted, his voice echoing from wall to wall in the silence.
We defy you! If you kill me, you might as well kill all of us!
There was some uneasy shuffling of feet amongst those sections of the crowd who didn't feel that this was absolutely axiomatic.
We can resist you, you know, growled the man. Can't we, everyone? What was that slogan about being united, Sergeant?
Said Colin, feeling his spine turn to ice.
I warn you, dragon, the human spirit is...
They never found out what it was, or at least what he thought it was, although possibly in the dark hours of a sleepless night, some of them might have remembered the subsequent events and formed a pretty good and gut-churning insight, to wit, that one of the things sometimes forgotten about the human spirit is that, while it is, in the right conditions, noble and brave and wonderful, it is also, when you get right down to it, only human. The dragon flame caught him full on the chest. For a moment he was visible as a white-hot outline before the neat, black remains spiraled down into a little puddle of melting cobbles. The flame vanished. The crowd stood like statues, not knowing if it was staying put or running that would attract more attention. The dragon stared down, curious to see what they were going to do next. Colin felt that, as the only civic official present, it was up to him to take charge of the situation. He coughed.
Right then,
he said, trying to keep the squeak out of his voice.
If you would just move along there, ladies and gentlemen. Move along now. Move along. Let's be having you, please.
He waved his arms in a vague gesture of authority as the people shuffled nervously away. Out of the corner of his eye he saw red flames behind the rooftops and sparks spiraling in the sky.
Haven't you got any homes to go to?
He croaked. The librarian knuckled out into the library of the here and now. Every hair on his body bristled with rage. He pushed open the door and swung out into the stricken city. Someone out there was about to find that their worst nightmare was a maddened librarian with a badge. Let's see. The next bit's another 10 pages long, I think, so that's probably as good a place as any to stop for the evening. Stop for the weekend. Because it is Friday. Yay! Yay! That was sort of a grim bit there. Someone actually standing up to the dragon did not end well. And Colin, unfortunately, not having too much backbone, but then again, even if he did, then there probably wouldn't be too much more Colin. Bard bit. Oh, big stretch. That's right, Ben. We're almost done. He always can tell when I'm actually finished. He comes running in with a different energy once I stop the stream. It's just kind of funny. He's like, yay, we get to play or go cuddle on the couch or something. Yay. We're getting close to the end of the book. Gonna have to do another
examination of what to do after that. Oh, I see. Grim equals bard. Therefore, grim bit equals bard bit. I understand, Sharkies. Man. So it's the weekend. Any big plans? I don't think Farmouser and I are up to too much this weekend. I kind of hope not. Farmo says homework. Yeah. I'm going to take a day or two to not think about D&D. And then I've got to figure out which games had happening next after that. Sharkies have business, though mostly mundane. Mostly. Busyness. Hey, I saw that. Alright. Well, I'll see y'all next Wednesday. TELUS is changing your copper lines to fiber optic on Sunday. Ooh. Yeah, they came through, I don't know, like a year ago or something and installed optic in our strata area. So we're on fiber optic internet ourselves. That's Sunday. Did I say Sunday? Hopefully I read that right. Well, hopefully that isn't too much of a hassle for you guys. Say hello to the kids. I'll talk to you next week. Have a good weekend. I'm going to log out now. Bye-bye.